Good evening, everybody. It's an honor to be here. It's hard to believe, actually, that I am here accepting this award. Not too long ago, this was all a napkin drawing, and now it's a reality, and I still can't wrap my head around that. It's been an incredible journey. I work at the United Nations World Food Program. For those of you who don't know it, our mission is to end hunger. And traditionally, we've practically been a logistics company. We ship grain around the world like corn and rice, from where it was available to where it was needed. And for me, when I first proposed this to WFP, it was a bit of a hard sell. Like, people are like, why do we need Bitcoin at WFP? And it took a while to sort of say, okay, there's Bitcoin and everything, and then there's the underlying technology, blockchain, and that's what we want to do. And we eventually got the green light to, start testing this out. And as you saw, this is now being implemented in a refugee camp, or actually two of them, in Jordan for Syrian refugees. So we went there, we visited the place and everything, and it's a bit surreal, it's in the middle of the desert, there's really nothing there, and there is a relatively well-stocked supermarket. They have everything from pasta to olive oil to whatever else you would expect, but there's not much else. And the people who live there have escaped horrors. I mean, you might have seen some stuff in the news about what's been going on in Syria. And because there's not much else to do, this going to the supermarket is almost like a social event. In one of the camps in particular, people go 14 times a month, and the average outside the camps is twice a month. And that's just to show that, that just going there is something. And it became important then not to change this experience for them. It was a sort of a source of stability, sort of something concrete they could measure after everything they had escaped. So that was when it really hit me, like what we're dealing with here. This wasn't just a simple experiment. This had to work. We couldn't disrupt these people's lives. And so the pressure became that much more. It so happened they were already using iris scanning technology to purchase their food. And in order not to make a disruption, we just connected that to our blockchain system, and we used the iris scan to trigger the private key of beneficiaries, again, to try to minimize the change in their experience. So for a few days leading to the first transaction, we hadn't really slept. And when for the first time a beneficiary or refugee scanned their iris and it worked and the receipt printed out, that's when I took my first breath. I'm like, okay, this is working, and it can sort of the future became a little bit more certain. Ever since, we've been trying to scale up. So we started with 100 people, we went to 10,000, we went to 100,000 this January, and we hope to reach 500,000 by the end of this year. Thank you. And yeah, I mean, that challenge is always there to make sure this thing works. I mean, this is people's lives. We really have to take it with a lot of responsibility. But for me, even some of my own thoughts and doubts sort of were relieved by that. And that's sort of where I hope to see a little bit more my project, at least if it can serve as an example, if there are questions. I mean, there were a lot of questions about scalability of blockchain, and I think we've at least answered some of them, as I believe the largest implementation of blockchain technology for humanitarian purposes. So the key thing I like about what we're doing actually is that we're applying cutting-edge technology outside of its normal context. You hear a lot of cool stuff coming out of the Silicon Valley and all of that, but here, we're talking about a refugee camp in Jordan. But often this is the place people most need it. In Jordan, refugees cannot open bank accounts. They don't really have access to financial inclusion. A lot of the refugees also don't have identity. Even if they had it, they destroyed it on their journey, because if it fell into the wrong hands, it could mean sometimes death for them. And without ID and without being financially included, there's very little you can do. I mean, imagine your own daily lives, just even coming here without a credit card or without some form of ID, how difficult that would be. As countries get more integrated, a lot of the technologies are being made available in sort of developing countries as well. But unless, again, you have some of a form of banking or ID, you can't access them, which means it remains out of reach for the most vulnerable people. And this is one of the reasons I like blockchain, because I think it has the potential to solve both the financial inclusion and identity problem for the people who really need it around the world, people who don't have it at all. For this to work, though, I do think, again, we have to realize it's new, it's emerging, we need to test it carefully, especially when it affects people's lives, but I think the theory is sound, and I hope projects like ours show that it can work. But I think there also needs to be a lot more collaboration, especially in the blockchain space. We need to break out of silos and direct competition, and things need to be developed collaboratively for things to work, especially in the humanitarian context. And this is something I hope we can achieve. Again, it's been an honor being here. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm going to be around for the next couple of days, so hope to get a chance to speak to some of you.